school bus. Dear Tim and Moby, what's the difference between weather and climate? From the Leech. Weather is what's going on with the atmosphere at any particular time. Right now, it's not looking so good. Climate is an area's pattern of weather over a long period of time. Well, for example, people say Southern California has a warm, sunny climate because so many days are warm and sunny. But climate is about more than just sunshine. Climatologists, the people who study climate, define it by many factors, including averages of precipitation, temperature, and air pressure. They divide the Earth into 5 major climate types. Tropical climates are found close to the equator. They receive more sunlight than any other area, which means they're often very, very hot. In fact, temperatures in tropical areas average higher than 18 degrees Celsius, or 64 degrees Fahrenheit, every month. Actually, the major climate types are divided into subtypes too. Like tropical climates exist in places with lots of rainfall, such as rainforests, as well as drier areas like the savannas of Africa. A little bit farther away from the equator are dry or arid climates. These places usually get less than 25 centimeters of rain per year. They include deserts like the Sahara. No, not all dry zones are hot. Cold deserts like the Gobi in Asia have temperatures that often drop below freezing. The third group is made up of mild or temperate climates. In these areas, the summers can be hot, but the winters are not very cold. You can find temperate climates along the Mediterranean Sea, in the south and west coast of North America, and in Australia, Southern Africa, and parts of South America. Continental climates have a wider temperature range with much colder winters. They're found in the northern hemisphere below the Arctic Circle. You can find them in the interiors of continents and on their eastern coasts. Humid continental climates with warm summers and cold winters are located throughout North America and Eastern Europe. Subarctic continental climates are found a little bit further north in Canada and northern Russia. Finally, the polar climates are known for their consistently cold temperatures. Every month of the year averages below 10 degrees Celsius. Yes, you're very clever. The polar climates do tend to appear at the north and south poles of the planet. Well, a lot of factors determine an area's climate. For example, places near oceans tend to have more moderate climates than landlocked areas. The temperature of the ocean doesn't fluctuate as much as the temperature inland. That means areas on the shore tend to have cooler summers and milder winters. Ocean currents also have a big impact on climate. You may have heard of a big current in the Atlantic Ocean called the Gulf Stream. It brings warm water from the tropics north toward Western Europe. This warm water makes the climate in Western Europe a lot milder than it would be otherwise. Yep, an area's climate determines the plants and animals that can live there, and even the type of geological features you might see. See what I mean?
All right, so these are your notes on climate. First thing we need to do when it talks about climates is we need to know the difference between weather and climate. Weather conditions change from day to day. For instance, we could have a day that is warm and sunny, and then the next day is cold and snowing. Weather is the conditions of the atmosphere for an area. So when we talk about measurements of weather, we're going to talk about precipitation. We're going to talk about temperature. We're going to talk about moisture. Okay, and we're going to talk about atmospheric conditions. In other words, what's the sky look like? For climate, it is the average of these things over a long period of time. And when we talk about climate, we're going to talk mostly about two main things. We're going to talk about temperature, and we're going to talk about precipitation. Some of the words that we use to describe temperature, okay, in these cases might be, let's say, humid, arid, dry, okay. Actually, dry would be more for precipitation, okay. Temperatures might be like tropical or polar. So humid and arid, we're going to be warm or cold, basically. Warm for humid and arid, and tropical. Polar is going to be cold. Two different climates affect the lives of daily people who live there. So let's say polar versus desert. If you live in a polar region, okay, you're going to have people wearing warmer clothes. And they're going to have longer hair, and they're going to have redder faces. In desert regions, okay, they're going to have lighter clothing. On the other hand, we're going to use words for precipitation like dry. We're going to do moist. We're going to do words such as humid or arid. Arid can also be used there too. So there are factors that actually affect a climate. The first one is a word which a lot of people get mixed up with longitude, and this is latitude. Latitude is flatitude. Latitude are the lines that go across. So like 0 degrees latitude would be the equator. The climate of an area is directly related to the amount of energy from the sun that area receives. So this depends on the latitude. So if you're at 0 degrees latitude, which is the equator, you're going to be warmer. And then if you're at 90 degrees latitude, which is the poles, you're going to be cooler because there's less direct sunlight that is actually hitting those areas. So the amount of solar energy an area receives depends upon its latitude. So more in the middle, you're going to get more direct sunlight. At the tops, you're going to get less direct sunlight. The second factor that affects climate is something called elevation. So temperature changes as elevation changes. Elevation can affect the type of winds. So for instance, you could have moist winds or you can have dry winds. So in areas such as this, okay, depending upon its elevation, on the west side, air rises up the mountainside. The rising air cools and releases precipitation. The precipitation supports a lush planet community in this area. On this side, you'll have a dry side, where dry air flows over the mountain and warms as it sinks, and the warm air absorbs moisture and creates conditions under each which may develop into desert regions. Elevation can affect temperature. So temperatures at higher locations are typically cooler. This is why you can see snow at the top of the mountain, even though it might be summertime. So if you've ever been to the Rocky Mountains, or if you go to Pigeon Forge and see the mountains, you'll notice at the top it usually have still snow on it, even though it's in the middle of June. That's because the mountains are pretty high up. So the higher you are, the cooler you get. That's why on the top of Mount Everest and Mount Fuji, there's always snow. The third factor that's going to affect our climate is winds. The speed, direction, temperature, and moisture of the wind affect the climate and the weather of the areas they move through. Winds carry water vapor from place to place. If the air cools, the water vapor condenses and falls as precipitation. The fourth factor that affects a climate is closeness to large bodies of water. Water helps to moderate temperatures of nearby land. So sudden extreme temperature changes rarely take place on land near large bodies of water. So that's why places like California, Florida, they tend to have the same temperature range. Even places like New York, they tend to stay pretty darn cool during certain times of the year. Okay, places that are inland experience wider ranges of temperature, like us in Ohio. We could get temperature ranges that go from 0 degrees Celsius all the way up to almost like 70 degrees Celsius. And in terms of Fahrenheit, that's like -3, 4 to even temperatures above 100. So we are in what we call an inland climate. We get extreme changes in temperature. Current also affects climate. Cold currents cool the air in the coastal areas, while warm currents warm the air in coastal areas like the Gulf Stream. There are 3 major climate zones. The first climate zone is the one that we live in, and this is temperate. Okay. For the average temperature during the coldest months are 18 below degrees Celsius, which is 64 degrees Fahrenheit, to the warmest months of the year, which are 10 degrees Celsius or above, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Third or second type of climate zone is polar, and these are where temperatures rise above 10 degrees, barely rise above 10 degrees. So obviously really cold. And then the other climate zone we'll have is tropical. And these are obviously areas that are pretty darn warm and also can have lots of rain. So here below, you can see the map of different types of climates. There are different maps that show different types of climates. Like not everybody shows mountains as being a climate or Mediterranean, but definitely polar, temperate, arid is pretty dry, tropical is pretty wet. Okay, so this is the end of your climate notes.